Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to podcast. Welcome to the Forbidden Dinner Table. I am one of your hosts, Zach.
And I am Alex.
And we've got a fun one for you in store today. It's going to be a little bit of a mix, I think, between a continuation of our last two episodes and going to some new topics, which is great. So just a quick kind of look in the rearview mirror. We have been talking a lot in the last two episodes about protesting and what is the role of government. And I think, you know, when I sort of look at our agenda today, we're going to be talking about some more things in the politics kind of sphere around populism versus kind of party lines, pure democracy in the concept of like, should everybody just have a vote? Should everything be a referendum? And then I think I want to take us to an interesting spot too and talk about a new political position that I would like to put out as a proposition to the folks, something I've been thinking about. That's our agenda today. And when I look at it, I think this is going to be a fun one.
This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah. So, Al, anything you want to say before we just kind of dive right in?
Nothing I want to say. I like that we're still kind of continuing the same vein of topics because there's just so much here. And we're just kind of keep trying to dig a little bit deeper, hit things from different angles, bring up some new points. And if anybody says, oh, I never thought about that, well, then I think we've done our job. So
definitely. We're going to explore the space, find the walls, find some good stuff, and
break down the wall, explore more space.
Break down the fourth wall, and find some gems along the way. I think we left sort of one teaser that I did in the last one was the idea of when electing somebody, whether at the local level or the national level, this idea of should you vote somebody that is just totally like party lines, or should you vote somebody who's a little bit more populism and is swayy with the constituents and changing how they view? I'm going to frame the question a little bit differently of like, if there are, you and I find ourselves in the middle on a lot of stuff. I would say we both take the kind of label moderate, and I like that we both are sort of like, I don't really care about the R or the D, break down just the problem or the claim. Yep. Show your work is a comment you made in the past that I really like. But let's put ourselves in a camp that we are a little bit more hard left or a little bit more hard right, and thinking through this problem or question of like, if the candidate that the party puts forth, the party that you belong to puts forth, is just a buffoon, right? Or I'm going to use the word schmuck because I think that fits a lot of politics.
You said buffoon, and I thought there's a few examples, and then you said schmuck, and I went, there's probably a lot of examples.
Yeah, exactly. This idea of like, okay, do I vote for the person who represents my set of ideas, even though that I think they are like problematic? Maybe is even a better word. Or do I take this approach of like, they may not exactly align with my views, but I want just a good leader, right? Because this is where I think the idea of being a republic gets problematic, because it's like, yeah, I may hate the person, but all I really care about is that they vote the way that I would want the vote cast for these particular bills or for these particular topics.
Right. There's another thing at play here too, which is I may hate the person that represents my party, but I have to vote that one in because I don't want the other guy to win. Yes.
So these are all sort of like attacking the same center, but coming at different lens of like, they're like different seats at a table of like, I may hate the person, but I like the ideas, or this idea of like, well, do I want to vote somebody who's just going to be hardline on the party, or someone who's going to sway more with the populism of the constituents? And maybe I'm slightly mad about that, but like, you can't be mad at somebody who, from a political standpoint, is trying to do the will of their people in that district as well.
Yeah, and I'm just noticing something up front here. We're talking very binary. So this is the American lens at the moment, which is sort of problem number one, is most of these come down to two choices. If there are more choices, this would be less of an issue. But I just wanted to state that up front.
Yeah, that we are in a first past the post system.
Yeah. And really, it's Republican, Democrat. Like, there really isn't a viable third choice. Not to say there aren't good third choice candidates, but the odds of them actually making any sort of splash just don't ever seem to pan out.
Yeah, there are a few independents, I believe, in Senate.
There
Bernie
are,
Sanders
there
being
are,
one of them,
yeah.
But
Maybe I'm thinking
it's
more
an uphill
presidential,
battle.
but it's certainly an uphill battle. And yeah, maybe locally they do have a little bit more of a chance, but it's the rarity. It's the exception.
Yes. Yes. It's the exception over the bull moose candidate bulls.
The bull moose. So let's get back to your original issue here, though, which is because my thought as you're talking about this, I think I said it at the end of the last episode. I would like someone that's a little more populist of the people, representing the people that they're representing in Congress or Senate or whatever it is. So I would like that. And I think a problem too is as you have people that have been in 8 terms of Congress, I think they lose touch. So that's where I think checking back in.
Stop writing bills about faxes. We don't care anymore about emails.
I think they lose touch of what their people actually want because they get so caught up in the machine that a way to check back in and stay populist, I think, would be a good thing.
I guess where I go in my mind is I don't fault them because that is like the path to re-election, and I understand that as part of the game of politics is they're going to do what it takes to be re-elected, because that is just like
but what does that
self-serving
mean?
piece. That means that if you're voted in as something like super hard-lined, and then let's say it's a very tight race and it's a 51 to 49% sort of win on your hard-line views, and then you understand that the population of your constituents are shifting, are you going to say like the people voted me in with this, I'm going to stick to this agenda, or is the politician going to say I'm going to flow and ebb a little bit with these pieces? Because I'd be mad if I voted somebody in and then they're floating on the things that I was like, this is why I voted you in. I cared about this X bill, X cause.
It's kind of interesting because you're seeing. Okay, so let's start with this. You get in, and from your side, if I'm understanding correctly, you're kind of saying, well, I got in because I ran on these issues, so I'm just never going to change those because they got me in.
What I'm saying is I'm bringing this up as a point. I don't agree entirely with the always hardline stance, but I'm a little bit worried about the idea of populism because then you shift from the whole reason that you sort of got voted in the first place and the expectations as to what you were going to do as a political person who got voted in.
Where I was going with that is you're seeing changing those things via populism as like a little bit of a gamble, and I'm seeing it the other way around, as in sticking with the things forever is the gamble. Whereas changing and growing, I would think would make more sense.
Well, maybe it's a let me try your idea here on for size of like you just need to do the thing that gets you the most interest in votes, and then you not that you throw it all away, but then you shift to a platform that is going to try to be the most inclusive without trying to contradict yourself.
Yeah, I think there is an element of like, okay, I'm in, now I can do what I really want.
Yeah, that's true. I think about something like, and this is a difficult example because I'm a huge fan of this thing that came out, but like how Barack Obama spoke against same-sex marriage at the beginning of his term. And then now, I think when he was running actually for his first term, and then by the end of his second term was like fully embracing it with open arms. Like America had changed along that way. It's just also very interesting to be like this. I'm getting elected to do this thing, and now I'm flipping on this thing.
Yeah, but I like that because you said the right thing, which is we changed culturally, and he changed with it. So I think that's great. That's a good example. More should do that versus saying, well, so in my example too earlier, it was like, well, when I was elected in 1980, I ran on these things, and those are still the things. Like, okay, well, that's not great either. So things should change and update. Maybe the speed at which they change and update is what we could sort of have a debate about. But
Yeah, and I want to be very clear. I'm not making the case that somebody who gets voted in should only like do 100% the things that they platformed on. That's not my case. My point is there's a tension here between following through on the what you platformed for and what people voted you in for versus the changing cultural piece.
What happens to throw a little bit of a wrench into this? What happens when one political party says we're going to run on we're not them? Which I hate. It's like, well, you need to run on things that you're going to do, not just, well, we're not them. So, and they messed it up. So trust us is not good either. Which I think is going to happen going into the midterms here.
Well, and I think it was my problem with the DNC during like 2019 when they were going for the 2020 election. I wanted the Democrat candidates to talk about what they wanted to do, and the majority of their airtime was spent saying we're not Donald Trump.
Great example.
And it was like,
to which I go, okay, but you haven't told me why I should vote for you.
Yeah.
And maybe to a lot of people they said that's enough. Obviously it was, but
sure.
I guess that's not good enough for me. I guess I'd vote for nobody then, because nobody's given me a reason to vote for them. If that's
is Nader still running? Could I write that in? Well, I think though, then through a weird waving of events, it got to be Biden, and then I think Biden in the debates played very well to the moderates. He played.
I think that's true.
Won that piece there,
and still is. He's stayed pretty true to that. I think.
Yeah.
Quieting down the far left of his party.
That is true. That is very
more
true.
Towards the middle.
The moderates and independents are not a huge fan of Biden right now, which is an indicator that the left or the Democrats are going to get trounced in the midterms. But we'll see how that goes.
Well, that and there's a lot that people can point to. The funny thing is the left isn't happy with him because he just hasn't done things that he ran on, which to bring it into this conversation.
Yeah.
No, but it's not a populist thing. It's just he hasn't done it. So what do you do with that?
That's true. Well, then, yeah. Normally, people at this point would use the excuse of like, well, I'm just getting set up, and I'm figuring this out. Or Trump had that excuse in the beginning, but it's like Biden, you've been in this game for so long. You should have seen this coming.
It doesn't work for someone that's been
here for
in Washington
years.
for 40 years.
Yeah.
So I do remember when they were like, we need a refreshing face like Joe Biden. It's like, what? We've seen him forever. This jolt of new energy. This is the old guy who's been here the longest.
Yeah. I don't know. I think as a moderate, speaking just personally, I look at this through a different lens of like, I care more about watching a political leader's response about a good political leader will acknowledge that they can't do it all themselves and that they need to surround themselves with smart people and will listen to people and work with a good cabinet to move in good directions. And yes, that will as new data comes out, as new findings come out, as things progress, I want to just put somebody up there who I think is a good problem solver. And I look at what their claims about past things or the platform that they're running on for me personally to see, do I think you're appropriately responding or would be a good problem solver with the issues that are proposed, out there? Because, like, I don't know what this says about me now that I'm just thinking about a little bit of, like, I could vote for somebody who's anti-gun. I could vote for somebody who's pro-gun. It's not about specifically the stance that they take. It's about how they're going to build that up and say why they're doing what they want to do.
In that particular example, I kind of agree, yeah.
Yes.
I have other examples where I would need it to be one thing versus the other.
I have other examples where you have a ginormous mountain you need to explain
maybe
away,
that's a better way to phrase it. Let me draw this little bit of a line here, too. This could be different based on levels of government because we're sort of talking federal government, Congress. Yes. That is a good place for voting somebody in and voting someone in for what they believe and letting them do the bidding in Washington. And if maybe the populism doesn't really work because they can't do a whole lot for your community. Like that's not really their job, but a governor or I don't know, if you go down to like county or city mayor or something,
Sure.
They should be much more populist because they can directly impact everybody's lives in that community. Maybe asking populism for your congressional representative doesn't really make as much sense.
There's layers in between there that makes the populism harder versus if you have a city alderman who's just ignoring the waves of people at the city meeting to be like, I was voted in. I said we were going to do all brown mailboxes. We were doing all brown mailboxes.
Yeah. And everyone's like, I like my white one. We're like, why do we have to change them at all? And he's ignoring them. Then, that's going to be a problem. He should update that stance.
Yeah, that's true. This reminds me a little bit of, I'm not going to remember the name of the person they were on interviewing. I think it's actually Joe Rogan, more like an very old one. They talked about this concept of like the closeness to you and the relationship of like economic system. So what I mean by that is he talked about how he treated people in his family like communists. Like everything was open, it was very shared resources.
This. Yeah.
And then the layer outside of that, like your neighborhood was like socialists, and then as you move to the larger economy, treated like capitalists. And the comment around that being like it's this relationship between closeness and family to strangers. Like I'm willing to share a bunch of my resources with family, but as we get to more strangers, I want a little bit more kind of stricter rules or stricter policy pieces.
Yeah.
So I think about a lot too. It's an interesting concept.
That was an interesting breakdown. Yeah. And I think there's truth to it. I teased something at the end of last episode too, which was an idea that what if voting on bills and things like a congressional representative does was more like jury duty. Which we discussed a little bit at the end. But it was just a thought I had where we have the technology now to where we could all be pulled in to weigh in on these things, and you would have to rely less on representatives.
True. I was not a fan of your system.
You were not a fan. Do you want to say why?
Because I don't like the idea that the luck of the draw, you could have an extremely important bill and me as a citizen have no way, sort of.
Yeah, you could wish you got pulled into a bill that you cared more about.
Right. If
I didn't think about this, so that's a good reason.
If I care a ton about the environment and week 1 is a really important environment bill, week 2 is like whether or not parking spaces should be an hour longer, and that's the week that I get pulled. And then week 3 is like, should we pour oil into our rivers? I'm pissed that my voice only got heard as to whether we should have parking on weekends.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Something I didn't really think of. It was not a flushed out idea. It came to me and I was like, let's talk about that.
Yeah, we're exploring the space. I think this is almost a good segue over into direct democracy. Yeah, and sort of like the idea of technology being more available with the blockchain of like being able to vote online for stuff. And I've talked with some friends about this idea of like Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Like it's just a known thing across the United States. Like there's no trivia, there's no happy hours. Like Tuesday nights, 8 to 9 is like a sacred hour where you log into your government sanctioned app and you read through what are the things that are available, that are going up, and then you vote yes, no, or abstain, right? And everything is just a referendum. And
everything is a Google opinion reward.
you get 10 like government crypto coin for every vote that you do.
Yeah. There's got to be an incentive or people just won't do it.
You're unlocking like presidential bobbleheads.
Or it'd be like that quiz show, that cutie.
Oh, wow. Show. That was that's a callback.
That was a flash in the pan, huh? Where everybody loved it. And then it was like, enough of this.
That was fun though.
It'd be like that.
So at first I was like I've moved a little bit all over the board on this, so I may move again in the future.
Okay.
My ideas on direct democracy. At first I was like, no, the Democratic Republic is the best thing. And then I was like, why do I think it's the best thing? Because it's what we have. And I would think that the Founding Fathers set up the best thing of what we have. And that's a terrible reason to think that something is the best. So I didn't like that.
By the way, that something better will come along.
Yeah, probably. So I was like, okay, I don't like the reasons why I think this is the best. Let me explore new reasons or new things. And then I sort of was on this idea of like, direct democracy, it's just what the people. It's kind of about how I think of if I put in a vote for something but I lose, I just kind of shrug my shoulders a little bit and go, well, it's on me to go talk to my neighbors and convince them because maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe they all have the right view and I lost because I It wasn't my view wasn't the most popular one there, and it's on me to convince them of like, you're missing these things. It's a little bit difficult when we have like a 25 to 33% voter turnout, and you may think like 2/3 of the population actually agree with you, but just didn't go vote. That's a wrench a little bit in this thinking. But
well, that's kind of how things work today. Of like with presidential campaigns, I feel like I've never been a part of one, but I feel like the goal isn't to convert the other side; it's to get the non-voters out to vote for you, and that's how you win.
Yeah.
It's not to turn Republicans into Democrats. It's to go get the undecideds. That's how you win.
Yeah, and I haven't checked the numbers in a while recently. I know a while back when I did, there were more registered Democrats than Republicans, but Republicans have a higher turnout rate.
I think that's still true. Yeah.
I would guess it's still true. So as I was exploring this, I was like, okay, maybe I want pure democracy, and if I just lose, right? Of like, then I didn't make my case to the people around me in my sphere of influence, and like, there's things that I'm not accounting for. However, I started thinking more about this idea of like selfishness in voting, where a republic, you have hopefully intelligent leaders who can like see through that. This sort of like tragedy of the commons that plays out. This idea of like, I don't really want to vote for the post office to deliver to your, or like create roads is probably better because there's actually like more tangible costs you can think about there. Of like, I don't really care that there's a road paved to your house, but I care that there's a road paved to my house. So I'm going to vote that my house gets the road, and I'm going to not vote for any of your houses, right? And you need somebody who can transcend that. Because otherwise you're going to have all these counteracting weird votes of like, well, no, I want this only when it benefits me and not this global system thinking.
So there's two things that I thought of right away, and that's, you're touching on one of them, which is long-term thinking.
Yes.
People wouldn't really do that. They'd vote to, well, let's just give everybody $10,000 stimulus checks now, right? Why not? Well, long-term, that's probably not a good idea. That's just an example. There's tons of other things like that of we would all vote to do it now in our lifetime, when really we should spread it out or think longer term. Climate would be another one maybe that would be impacted. The second one is more like national security, and think about how much information the public is not privy to, and how are we supposed to vote on like what the military does? We have no idea.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that one. How would you have solved that?
Even right now,
jury duty example. Some people just get high security clearance.
But you could put something up like, should the military invade Canada? And everyone's just like, sure, yeah. When it's like, we shouldn't even be voting on that. Like, other people need to have intel information.
Conversations.
They need to make those decisions. Yeah.
It's reminds me of an amendment that was floated, but obviously never passed. So there's more people to be aware about it. When the United States wanted to declare war on somebody, it would be a popular vote, and anybody who voted yes had to take up arms.
Oh, that's interesting.
That was an amendment.
That's the kind of stuff I would like to see. Of like, you have to somehow put your money where your mouth is, and that's a good example.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, I can't think of another one off the cuff, but yeah, of like, okay, if you vote, then something happens. You're automatically volunteered to do something, and all of a sudden the numbers will drastically change.
If you want to vote for higher taxes, there's a penalty where you have to pay higher taxes than other people for a short period of time or something like that.
Sure, or like if you vote for the death penalty, you have to go meet the inmates. Or something like that, right? That changes it a little bit, and then you go, you know what, I don't want it anymore. But when I never see them, never interact with them, it's pretty easy to just be like, yes.
If you want to vote away homeless network community things, you have to go live on the streets for a week.
Something like that. I have an example here that I heard today, too, of why this is maybe not the best idea, and it has to do with Ukraine. We were talking about this a little bit before we started, but there were some polling numbers on just asking the question to the public, things like, should we set up a no-fly zone? Should we send troops to Ukraine? Blah, blah, blah. Things like this. And the numbers of yeses for a lot of these were surprisingly high. To which I go, people, that's a bad idea.
Have you thought about the consequences?
Yeah, exactly. It was like, I'd have to go back. I should have wrote the numbers down, but it was like 45% or something said yes, we should set up a no-fly zone, and I was like, that is ridiculous. And why is that so high?
Yeah.
Like, you guys aren't thinking long term. You just go, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do it. And it's like, whoa, no.
And to fill in, sort of just for people who be like, why is it not a good idea to set up a no-fly zone? You want to go? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not as simple. Here's the other thing is people might not understand exactly what that means. It's not just, well, there's a rule now that nobody can fly over Ukraine. We have to go enforce a no-fly zone, which means taking like equipment out, going into Russia, taking their equipment out, shooting down any jets. We have to be prepared to shoot down jets that enter the no-fly zone. And very quickly you find yourself basically into a World War III scenario. So it's not a good idea.
Yeah, if you commit to a red line, and especially with a player like Russia that might test it, you now have to follow through, and it's going to escalate so quickly.
So quickly. It's a bad idea. Yeah. But if people go, oh, we could just make a rule that you can't fly over Ukraine, let's do that. And it's like, that's not what they're talking about here.
Yeah.
They're talking about sending American military to enforce nobody flying over Ukraine, which means you need to be prepared to shoot down Russian jets. And we should not be prepared to do that right now.
That would be
an
aggressive move.
Ludicrous. Yeah. So hearing some of the numbers on those, the ones that were like send troops directly there and stuff were pretty low. But more sanctions, the no-fly zone one, all of these were pretty high. And I was like, okay, settle down, people. Like, we still got to, there's a lot to think about here. We can't just go in guns blazing, and maybe not literal guns, but we can't pull out all of our stops here. I mean, that's effectively starting another war. So,
and just to clarify, what you are not saying is we don't need to support Ukraine. What you're saying is we need to support them in intelligent ways and not create more of a powder keg situation here.
Yeah. Don't support how we can without escalating and bubbling this whole thing over. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Correct.
I mean, this just goes to something I've been thinking a lot about that spans a lot of topics of just when you're talking with people, and it can almost be a little bit annoying of like the level of clarifications that you have to do with people in a way of like, we have these ideas of definitions in our own mind. And then when somebody asks you a question, I'll give some examples here, but like when somebody asks you a question, you're like, oh, and then you just kind of start jumping in and answering the question. And what I'm trying to do a lot more, and it can be like, what do you mean? Why are you asking me this? But when you slow down and think about it, at least I found it's highly beneficial to see if you're even on the same page before you start talking about something. Here are two good examples. Number one, when somebody says, do you believe in God? Now my answer back is, what do you mean by God? Because I have an idea of God in my mind, but it may be totally different than what you have an idea. Like, because we all have this general conception, but
true.
Let's talk about that. Or the one example I was thinking about with somebody is where they were like, do you believe in trans rights? And I was thinking in my mind, and then I was like, wait, what specifically are you asking me? So I was like, trans rights to do what? And they were like, well, just trans rights. And I was like, you haven't specified like trans rights to kill people? Like, what is your, I mean, that's
you haven't defined right.
Like, what specifically are you asking me?
I had this problem with when people said voting rights, and everyone's like, oh, they're trying to take away voting rights. And I go, what do you mean?
Which ones?
And what are you referring to? Yeah, those are good examples. I find myself doing this a lot more. And Kirsten, my wife, gets annoyed because I come into a lot of things going, I'm on your side, or whatever so far, but I just want to ask this question. There's a lot of pre-clarifying things before I ask, and she's like, oh, it's like you need to just ask a question. And I go, no, because I'm looking for a specific answer to a specific thing. I don't want them to take it the wrong way. Just like you were saying, if I go, we shouldn't set up no-fly zones, and they go, oh, you don't support Ukraine? And it's like, whoa, hold on. Let's break this down. I didn't say that. I do, but we should do these things and not that things. Or your example about trans rights is great. Of like, do you believe in trans rights? It's like, I would have the same answer and go, what do you mean? To do what exactly? Because that might change my answer. To do one thing versus another, I might say, yeah, they can do that. No, they shouldn't be able to do that.
Right, and I feel
let's
like
clarify.
Sometimes you get accused of being very lawyery, And it's just like,
Yes.
people want to have these general conversations, and I'm trying to communicate at a hopefully more clear level of like, what specifically are you asking me?
Well, and I don't want to get thrown into a camp I don't belong in. Because if I go, trans rights, it's like, well, I'm not sure. And they go, oh, okay, so you're one of them. And I go, whoa.
Yeah, that's...
Don't put me over there yet. Like, let's talk about it, and then you can decide where you want to put me. Because you might be surprised.
Yeah. And not to toot our horn a little bit, but like, I think the fact that we even asked that question puts us in a slightly different camp than, well, I'll just say, I don't even want to say the majority, but a group of people that instead just want to answer generically and move in a direction. And it's both. And I had something happen in my life where somebody asked me, they were like, are you vaccinated? And I am vaccinated. So I said yes. And then it was something where I was going to be in like close quarters with a group of people or something like that. And there was no like, can I see your card, or like, can I look up your records? And I realized, whoa, the fact that there's just the way they can ask and they don't really need to validate is because there's so much like pride in this idea of like, somebody who's not vaccinated is going to probably proudly say they're not. And then they could be like, all right, well, now you're going to have to wear a mask next to these people. So they don't even have to like really do the verification piece. They're just relying on people being so proud about their stance of whether it's yes or no that they can just take people at their word. And I thought that was an insane kind of moment.
That is interesting, but it puts you in a camp, which maybe it shouldn't, right? But that's sort of what happened there. Is you said yes, and they were like, okay, I know what kind of person you are. Then no big deal.
Well, yeah, and in this case, it was okay. You're going to be working close with these volunteers or healthcare providers, and if you weren't vaccinated, they were going to ask me to wear a mask. Because I asked them, I was like, if I wasn't vaccinated, what would that mean? Yeah. But I said that after I said I was vaccinated. They were like, oh, that just means you'd have to wear a mask for the next,
It's like the old vegan joke has become the mask joke now of like, they'll tell you type of a thing.
Totally. And
that's funny.
And it was crazy to me that it's like, we've just, people have such pride in both sides that they can just ask the question and trust you're going to answer it truthfully because you have so much pride of like, I want to tell you how crazy it is that they are or are not people wearing masks.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I am a lot of these too. Like I am pro-vaccine with like caveats. So if someone just said like, "Are you pro-vaccine?" a yes is not really the correct answer for me.
Well, see, what you would say is, "What do you mean?"
Well, exactly. I'm just fleshing this out with another example now of I don't want to say yes or no because you're going to take more information than I'm giving if I answer with one of those.
Yes.
Personally, I would say everyone should get the vaccine, but there should be no mandates or government forced getting of the vaccine. But everybody should go get it, would be my response.
You're a big body autonomy guy.
Yeah. My my new constitutional amendment would not allow the government to do that. But with that being said, everyone should go do it. I don't want the government to be the one telling me what I can and can't do. And that's true for a lot of different things.
Yes.
That doesn't mean I shouldn't do or not do the thing. In fact, I heard a funny joke about as mask mandates and things get lifted, go around wearing a mask. And when people come up to you and go, you don't need to wear that anymore, just respond and go, I'm not a sheep. I'm not going to let the government tell me what I can and can't do. Just turn the table. What are you, a sheep? The government said you don't have to wear a mask, so you're just not going to wear one. You're not going to question that anymore. Just flip the whole conversation.
That's funny. I hadn't heard that before. I did hear, this was about a year ago when we were in the thick of it more, where people would wear masks, and when they'd be in elevators or kind of tight quarters and people weren't wearing masks and somebody would say something like, oh, this guy's got a mask on or something like that, then you take your mask up and go, oh, finally, people who don't care that I have just tested positive for COVID. And everybody gets quiet real quick in those situations.
That's good, yeah. I heard that one earlier today and thought it was funny.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Anything else you want to touch on in terms of the peer democracy? I don't know if we kind of went away from that trail a little bit. Just to circle it back a little bit, I'll say this is something that I found myself changing my viewpoint on a lot. Like I've shifted sort of year over year of like, oh, maybe this, maybe this, maybe that. I haven't quite found the groove, but I've moved away a little bit from pure democracy for the same reasons you brought up of like long-term thinking, tragedy of the commons.
Well, I think we came up with a couple examples of why it's not a good idea, but I will say this. I think like referendum input would be good, and we could totally do this, where those questions should go out to everybody, but strictly to sort of poll and tell our representatives the vibe of the nation and what we're thinking, and they can do with that information what they want. So again, if a large percentage of people vote to go support some sort of war effort, they might go, well, we're not doing that because that would be insane, and they're not thinking about this long term. However, if a large portion of the nation says we want trans rights protected, or depending on what that means, or we want to legalize gay marriage. Okay. Well, it sounds like people want it. Maybe that's something we should figure out. Or a good example right now would be like legalize marijuana. Just poll the nation and get input. Because then there are a lot of polls. Most of them are kind of state by state. There's some nation ones. But like, do that, get a hard number, and then do with that what you wish. That's how I could see it being used.
That's interesting. I like that. I mean, I will say I am usually a fan of when I see states doing referendums of like, I'm always interested in like, how is that going to shake out, whether it's legalization of marijuana.
We've had some good ones
voting rights things
here in Austin, that big hot topics. So they just go, all right, well, let's do referendum. You guys say yes or no. And then by the time it's over, it's like, then we're done with this. It gets put to bed and we do whatever the thing is.
Yeah, and something that I was chatting about with people, this was years ago with the whole Brexit thing with the UK leaving the European Union, and the idea that like in the sort of 3 days in the wake or the aftermath of the big vote coming through that they were going to leave the European Union and all this, I think one of my favorite things was like the Google spike search of what is European Union and stuff like that in the UK, which is like, oh boy. And this idea of like, oh no, like people were lied to, or it was, there were these kind of propaganda campaigns and all this sort of stuff surrounding that. This idea of like, well, maybe we should do another referendum. But somebody pointed out, like, that's a very dangerous precedent, because let's say it goes the other way. What do you do now? Best 2 out of 3 referendums?
Yeah, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah. So at first I was kind of behind, because I thought it was dumb that the UK was leaving the European Union. I was like, yeah, there should be another referendum with like more official campaigning and stuff. And then when people pointed that out, I was like, yeah, I guess that's a good point. You get one shot at it, you get the people to vote on, and then you do what they say.
You can't start playing, we didn't like the results, so let's do it again. And by the way, if you find yourself doing that, it's like, okay, well then that means that what would be the correct, I put that in quotes, answer. If you keep going, do it again, we didn't like it. Do it again, we didn't like it. Okay, well you're all leaning the other way. So
yeah. Well, it's whatever party's in power gets, because as soon as they hit the one that they want, they go, nope, no more, we're done, this is it. And
you almost need a rule going in that says in 5 years we can do another one and stick with that. Here's the referendum on leaving the EU. In 5 years, we'll do this again and see what happens. Could you imagine if they jump in and out?
I was going to say, those poor people already caught. They're just like, dust the other contract off. We'll bring that one out and sign that one again.
Yeah, but it's a whole new set of problems to join back in, which they might say, we probably shouldn't have left, but it's not worth it to get back in.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, but you got to deal with changing tides and things. I don't know.
True. At least they were on their own currency. How crazy would that be to like have to invent a new currency in today's day?
That would be a mess.
Yeah.
Well, that's like one of the reasons that Scotland is not being independent, I've read. Maybe not the latest one, because they do this every few years too, right? Mm-hmm. A few years ago, one of the big reasons was that. The UK basically said, well, you can't use the pound then if you leave. And they were like, ooh, that's going to be a huge mess. So,
yeah, and like, do you get a seat at the UN? Like, you don't get to be part of the UK?
Nope. Yeah, all of our protection treaties and all of that would not apply to you. Now, you could probably do it in a way that maybe it would, but those were things that got brought up that people were like, ooh, yeah, I don't want to change currencies.
once the UK decided to leave the European Union, there was the wave in Scotland that popped up of like, well, screw this, we're going to go be independent, then join the European Union.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I will tell you, when I went, I was in the UK. This been 2014. It was right after the Scottish independent vote, and I went a week or two after they had voted, and they had voted to not leave, right? And when I was walking all over Edinburgh, there were all these like "Be Brave Scotland" and like "Vote Leave," like "Vote Yes," and they were just like these very like sobering, like this. There's a weird energy in this, like they had just been defeated, right?
Like they just lost the Super Bowl or something?
Yes, exactly. Because there's all these stickers everywhere, and they're all kind of like they had this big rising movement that just got it caught completely out from underneath them. So
let's pivot back here. I want to hear your new political post or statement here.
Yes. So there is a political. This is thinking very much through the American lens, and I'm dusting off my high school social studies knowledge here. So, but it's my understanding there's a position called the whip in the party, whose job is to go around and whip up the votes and ensure that you are voting for, basically along party lines. Like it's their job to go around and say, these are the reasons you should vote. Like don't.
This is members of Congress or people.
Members of Congress,
specific?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So my understanding is it's like, you can be the Speaker of the House and you are...
By the way, did you like you mean members of Congress or people? That was an accident, but I thought it was...
But that is good.
No, I meant the public, but
yes,
anyways.
not a casual civilian. So you are... Like, you could be... And I'd have to look if there's a minority whip and a majority whip. My guess would be yes. But what matters more is the majority whip.
Probably.
Like that you were going to get people, right? And you're trying to whip people into the vote to make sure that whatever bill your party is putting forward, people are not veering off from it. And your job is literally go around, meet with people, and be like, whip the votes into shape.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So here's my new idea. I want to, if I'm going to run for office, or I would proposition the American government, I want to create a new position called the zipper, which doesn't belong to either political party. And when you put these major bills that would cross some type of threshold, well, it's a dollar amount or impact of people, then you go around and sort of, you're like a little bit of, you are the ping pong ball between the two to try and proctor deals. And I know there are positions that are supposed to be bipartisan, or maybe committees, I think it's the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, right? That is there's not partisan. Whatever the bill proposition is, they do their best to just run the numbers of here's the impact that it will be for any sort of bill that's out there. But
it's
I think
the parliamentarian of the Senate and the House as well is supposed to be neutral.
Exactly. But this idea of a zipper who when you have these major bills, they go around and sort of be like, well, they're the negotiator to say, well, what would it take? And get people's views on these things. And I just think now about a lot of the gridlock that's happening, even on the Democrat side of with Joe Manchin and things like that. And obviously they're trying to meet with Joe Manchin. The Democrats are trying to meet with them, but they're also trying to get Republicans to do and stuff like that. And I was like, what if you had a coordinated person whose job literally was, and to even get a little bit more technical, they would sit every other caucus. So they would caucus once with the Republicans and then caucus once with the Democrats. And, you are the zipper and you try to keep the political parties more in touch with each other.
I support it. Well, and you and I both have been big proponents of work together, stop trying to keep each other out. And any candidate that's well, I'm going to reach my hand across the aisle and we're trying to work with the other side, I immediately support them at least a little bit, because there's way too much oh no, we'll never work with them. No, they're the enemy. We don't want to work with them. And It's no. That's not what's best for everybody. I understand that that's the system that you've all now put in place, but it's not great because of all the gridlock and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's not how we get things
just work together.
Forward. And it creates this problem of you are doing up this legislation, and then 4, 6, 8 years later, you're just undoing it.
Yeah,
that's what I'm worried about, especially if they go with the nuclear option in the Senate and make it just 50 votes, like this, like doing and undoing. Like I don't know if we talked a little bit more on air about like this idea of like, yeah, that would be able to get things done more, but also it creates this potential like doing undoing wave.
I've heard, I forgot which country it was, but they made a statement of the whiplash that they get every 4 years when America votes. And it's like, I bet, especially from the foreign side, where it's like every 4 years we have to deal with a completely different country.
Well, we're dealing with it right
diplomatically, but the people are obviously all pretty much the same. But to them, it's like, nope, all these new things now are our main goals. Those old goals, throw them in the trash. And they're like, okay. And then 4 years later, nope, those goals, throw them in the trash. Here are all our new goals.
Like, I've heard this with the Iranian nuclear deal, where they were basically like, if you join a new deal, we want to make sure that you are not going to be able to back out of this one. And they were like, well, if the deal's done from just the executive branch, you can't make that guarantee. So you have to do it from the legislative branch somehow to get a backing from Congress. And good luck getting the amount of people to agree on to some type of preliminary Iran negotiating deal there.
Yeah, that's
and
another.
So, like, it's crazy that we like can't. When you step up and make this sort of like, claim or proposal, we'll be like, in 4 years this may not be around anymore.
Yeah, but that's what foreign
Paris
leaders
Climate Accord.
Think about when they go, well, for the next 4 years at least, we're going to do it this way, and then it might change.
Yeah. I mean, this, it makes me think a lot about the best form of government, the most efficient. If you want to get stuff done and help your people the most, the greatest form of government is a benevolent dictator.
Well, yeah. Right. If you want to get things done, I suppose. It just might not be what you want done, but things will get done.
Well, and that's right. You got to say benevolent, right? You got to say somebody who really cares about the people. Now, I don't know how many instances in just world history that there has been a benevolent dictator. But if you want somebody to like clear the path and really get stuff done and do things for the people, that's your best form of government.
I will say I've learned a lot about our gridlock through these, especially through the Trump-Biden transition, to where now I know going into the following, by what would be Biden's assuming re-election, or unless they run somebody else, to like just look at it differently, because this is really the first one I've paid full attention to. I remember Obama into Trump, but not as much. So I have a completely different lens now because I've seen what Biden has and hasn't done, to where it's obviously the campaign trail is full of promises.
Oh yeah.
And I now sort of have the lens to go, he'll get like 10% of those done. Mm-hmm. Like the people that freak out and go, they're going to end this law and this law is going to go away. It's like, probably not. Even if the president wants to do it, it's probably not going to get done. Like, that's just the system that we have, or someone will put up a big fuss and it'll go away. And I just have a completely new lens to view all of that in and not panic or freak out, especially the people that are like, this law, Roe versus Wade's going to get overturned. It's like, probably not. I mean, and if it does, then deal with it. But there's a lot of those types of things where it's like,
that's the political game.
To try and
that's
get
the political game
or not.
To try and scare you into voting, or all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's kind of funny. It reminds me, in thinking about the transition, this is the first time I've really paid attention for the important 100-day marker, right? Of 100 days in office and what can you all get done.
Yeah.
And I used to think, I remember when I started working in corporate America, and somebody threw out dates on the very first project that I was on, and they were like, yeah, maybe we can get that done in like 3 or 4 months. And me, coming from school where you switch classes every 10 weeks because I was in the trimester system, I was like, 3 or 4 months to get something done. I was like, that's insane. These timelines, these are, we can't get stuff done sooner. And then a year later, a similar project, we want to do something vaguely similar. And somebody was like, yeah, maybe we can get that done in 3 or 4 months. And I was like, it's going to take you 5 or 6. I had become so just into the system of oh yeah, no, we can't do that in 3 or 4 months. And now I look at the 100 days in office. Now, at first I'd be like, yeah, you could probably get some stuff done. That's a little over 3 months. You can get some stuff done. Now I'm like, yeah, let's hope you got your cabinet smoothed out and all the positions filled for who's going to be in your whole administration in 100 days.
Yeah, exactly. In the same vein, too, of like seeing through the political game or the scare tactics, it was announced today that Mike Pence is launching a $10 million ad campaign, which is record-breaking, with the exception of Trump. But all of the things, reading about what the ads cover, are all like, it's just so easy to like see through them. So, for example, one, he's dissing Biden for some sort of oil issue because we rely too heavily on Russia, which is now a problem. And it's like, well, 7 days ago, this wasn't a problem. So for you to run an ad on this is like ridiculous. Even you had the foresight to see, like, is again, scare tactics, like you were saying. And
this isn't like Pence running for a particular position. These are just conservative values.
It's like a general midterm party ads.
Blitz. Gotcha.
Yeah. But people say he might be gearing up, starting with this, but this is just more aimed at the midterm and to drum up support for his side.
Gotcha. Huh. Man.
Yeah, so in the ad, by the way, I'm just going to quote this. It says, the decision to halt a oil pipeline endangers America's security and helped Russia fund their invasion. It's like, just 7 days ago, this wasn't even a problem. Like, it's crazy that you can't trash somebody for that. Like, you just got to see through it.
This is kind of where I think about when Trump at a rally talked about getting the vaccine and a bunch of people booed. I was like, well, this is interesting because Trump can either push forward the vaccine, being like, this is one of my greatest achievements as president, that we did Operation Warp Speed and developed the vaccine, right? But if he's gonna, just kind of succumb to these people jeering and all this sort of stuff and talk down the vaccine, well, then you get to turn around and hit him with like, oh, so that wasn't a big accomplishment that you did? Like, he's just caught in the middle there.
Into a corner, yeah, right.
Good deal. What do we have for time now?
We're right about there, so I think this is an interesting stopping point.
Yeah, I'm happy we went a little bit...
We zigged and zagged a little bit.
We zigged and zagged. I was about to say we went a little bit lighter than our last two, and I can imagine some listeners going, this is lighter than the last two? But that's sometimes how I just think.
We got a little off script. We riffed a little bit more on this one, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
No. I feel good about it.
That's all that matters. I will say this, you called it in the beginning, but it was a fun one.
It was a fun one. Always is with you, Al. Cool. Well, thank you all for listening. Hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, an amazing month, a better year, and a wonderful life.
Wow. Take it, use it, live. Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening.